You ever get that feeling that something is just off? You know, like the world you see every day, the world you interact with, feels a little bit theatrical, maybe even scripted. Well, according to our source for this explainer, that feeling, it's not just in your head. It's a sign that reality itself is actually being replaced. That's a pretty intense quote from behavior expert Chase Hughes. He argues that what we call reality has been systematically swapped out for a simulation, built one layer at a time. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack that argument and break down exactly what these layers are supposed to be. The source lays out 6 very distinct layers that all work together to create this new artificial world. We're going to walk through every single one, from the symbols you see every day, all the way up to the very nature of political power. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to explore all 6 layers, kicking things off with a world built on symbols. Then we'll see how content is used to condition our behavior. After that, we'll look at the engine of division that powers this whole thing, see how politics becomes just a performance, and finally, find out what the source says we can actually do about it. So the first and probably most visible layer is what's called mediated reality. This is the big one, the foundational shift where our connection to the real, tangible world is kind of severed and replaced with something else entirely. And this slide really illustrates that fundamental change. I mean, think about it. We used to live through events. Now, most of the time, we just experience the coverage of them. So we're not getting reality anymore. What we're getting is a pre-framed, pre-packaged interpretation delivered to us through a screen. To really get how this works, let's look at the word brand. You know, its original meaning wasn't about logos, but about literally burning a mark into livestock. Why? To establish ownership and make them easy to sort. According to this theory, that's exactly what's happening to us. These forces, advertisers, political storytellers, algorithms, they're all constantly trying to brand us. They assign us labels and identities to make our reactions predictable, to make our behaviors easy to sort, and to make our loyalties crystal clear. And this brings us right back to that feeling we started with. If you're living in a world of symbols instead of substance, where identities are assigned to you like brands, well, it's no wonder things feel artificial. The argument is, that's because they are. Okay, let's move on to the next 2 layers, because these 2 work together to actively shape how we behave. This is where we get into human conditioning and what's called the collapse of information. So the tools used for this training are called conditioning signals. And you know exactly what these are. The likes, the shares, the follower counts, the visibility metrics. It's all those invisible reward and punishment signals that guide what we do and say online. It's a really simple but incredibly powerful principle. The system rewards certain behaviors, you know, like outrage, simplicity, things that are easy to share, so people just repeat them. We end up kind of flattening our personalities to become more extreme and predictable. We stop asking, is this how I really feel? And start asking, how is this going to land? And here's the engine of that conditioning. The system replaces information with content. See, information actually resolves things. It answers our questions, it creates understanding, but content is designed to do the exact opposite. It's meant to occupy our attention, to trigger an emotional response, and crucially to prevent resolution. Because if something is resolved, you stop engaging with it. Now we get to the fuel that powers this whole simulation. The next 2 layers, fear and narrative warfare, they form the emotional and storytelling engine that keeps us all locked in, engaged, and, well, divided. So according to the source, there's one emotion that outperforms all the others for keeping us glued to our screens, and that's fear. It apparently scales engagement way better than anger and just astronomically better than joy. The system learns what makes your heart race and just feeds you more and more of it. And why is fear so darn effective? Well, because it makes us react faster. It just kills our ability to see any nuance. It makes us way more likely to share a perceived threat, and it burns the whole experience into our memory. A population that's managed by fear is a population that's easy to control. To keep that fear going, the theory suggests that our identities are deliberately kept unstable. Think about it. Every week there's a new crisis, a new villain, a new moral outrage. This constant stream of emergencies prevents us from forming a stable sense of who we are, which makes us way more likely to just accept the pre-packaged moral frames we're handed. And this is how it works, step by step. An event happens, and before you even have a second to think, a fully formed narrative arrives. It tells you who the hero is, who the villain is, and exactly how you're supposed to feel. Any nuance is just scrubbed away because nuance slows down reaction. and your immediate emotional reaction, well, that's the product they're after. And all of this brings us to the sixth and final layer. This is the grand stage where all the other layers come together in a massive ongoing performance, the theater of power. The argument here is a bold one, that modern politics isn't really about governing or solving real-world problems anymore. Its main function now is to be a performance, a show that's put on for an audience that's been conditioned by all those other layers we just talked about. And you can see this everywhere, right? Congressional hearings that look super dramatic but rarely accomplish anything. Political speeches that are designed to make us feel emotional but don't actually change any policy. Scandals that dominate the news for weeks and then just fade away with no real consequences. It's all theater. The major outcome of all this political theater is a shift in the central question we ask ourselves. We stop looking at things with a moral compass and asking, is this right? Instead, we start evaluating them based on pure tribal loyalty. Is this good for our side? So after laying out this pretty bleak picture, you might expect the solution to be about fighting back, raging against the machine. But the source suggests something completely different. The answer isn't resistance. And this right here is the key takeaway. The most powerful tool you have is simply awareness. You don't have to convince anyone else or expose some grand plan. The moment you truly see the layers, the moment you recognize the performance for what it is, its power over you is diminished. The manipulation starts to feel obvious, almost clumsy. And that's where we're going to leave it. The argument is that reality has been there all along, hiding underneath all the noise and the symbols. And the first step to finding it is just learning to see the simulation. So the only real question left is this. Now that you've been shown the machinery, what parts of your world are going to look different?